All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I will be continuing with the topic of perfection and striving. And I'm going to talk about the metaphor of fire, which was used in a lot of the early Buddhist teachings. And I'm going to refer to something called the fire sermon. Um, and it was like the third sutta that the Buddha had taught. And I'm getting my translation from Richard Gombrich. He's an Oxford scholar. But I'm just going to make some associations and talk about it and maybe make a few things, like pull a few things together, but really want you also to consider, um, just consider the topic of perfection and striving while I'm talking about some of these ways that he talked about fire. So, but first, I'm going to talk about my associations with fire, which living in Southern California has a very worrisome quality. And the world, we now know fire in a different way. We know that when the earth heats up really hot and catches on fire, it's now going into fire bombing, like explosions that we haven't seen in nature before. So fire has expanded and grown into even something else besides how we know it. It's continued to evolve and change. Um, and it's erratic. It can jump over some things, some houses, and burn one area and leave another area pristine. It has this kind of inconsistent, erratic quality. And also, we've harnessed fire or tamed it, within a form of electricity and battery. And we have heaters and stoves. So we often don't even have direct contact with what looks like fire, at the time of the Buddha. It comes in different ways. And one way that I love fire is in candles. I just love those rooms I'm very tempted by those rooms with candles everywhere, and then put a piano in it and a singer, and then I'm really, I'm really off to the races. But now, a lot of the candles I get have electric flames because you can't take, candles many places. And then also the other part of, light of fire is that we now can read at any time of the day or night. We have battery operated, fire operated phones, which will give us a glow so we can see anything in the news and on the internet at any time of day or night, which wasn't something that the Buddha, at the Buddha's time, they had, obviously. So this fire sermon, there were a few ways he was talking about fire that I thought were interesting in light of how we know fire now, and also in the topic of striving and perfection. So the first statement he made in the sutta is everything is on fire. And so, yes, we can actually relate to this statement. But at that time, what he was referring to was in the Vedic religion, they had three fires that they wanted to keep going all the time. They never wanted these fires to go out. And it was interesting when I visited Iran with my husband, we went to one of the temples where the fire had been kept going for 1,500 years. So this was really a thing, to keep these fires going. And what that symbolized was that this fire that was providing warmth and nourishment and light would be enduring and forever, and trying to make it go on forever. But the Buddha basically tipped that Vedic understanding and said, look, you have these three fires going, and I'm going to rename them. One I'm going to name is for your family members, for your dependents. One fire is for your parents, and one fire is for holy people. He said, and as you can see, these fires, in my estimation, are all about people. So I want you to keep fires going to support people. So he used fire in a very positive way, not this kind of erratic, scary, exponential way. He used it more like keep your fires going to support people. And that is, I'd say, something of a basis in Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practice, is that we're keeping fires going to support each other. That's what we do here to meet every day. That's what our practice is about. Now, in that same sutta, he also talked about 3 fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. Now, those are fires you don't want to keep going. So these fires are often known now as poisons. We talk about them as in the practice as poisons, but actually they were originally talked about as fires, and that we want to reduce the fuel of those fires. We don't want to feed those fires. So don't give them more credence, or have them burn brightly, though that those fires of greed, hatred, and delusion will basically wreck the house. They will be anti-support for people. And the sutta is interesting because he's talked about it in all these different ways, because then he goes on to talk about fires as dynamic processes. So he says each individual has 5 fires. So with these fires are, your body is considered a fire, a process, something that grows and diminishes. Your consciousness is a fire. Your perception, your ability to perceive is a fire. Your inclination and your habits are like a fire, and your ability to feel things that are positive, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And that these 5 fires, we're going to be keeping them going, and that they're going to be live processes. And again, this was something new at the time. Things weren't talked about in terms of process, of something that was changing and dynamic. It was really talked about as a thing. Your body is a thing, your mind is a thing. So the Buddha was on this kind of cutting edge of saying, well, I don't see it that way. I see these things as things that move and change and grow and diminish and go out at times and get exacerbated at other times. And so it kind of takes me to the last statement, which really is what I started this whole kind of looking at striving and perfection about, is the statement of practice like your hair is on fire.
Mm.
So there's this sense of urgency within the knowing of fire. And one of the translations I found was, just as one whose clothes or head had caught fire would put forth extraordinary effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefatigability. I didn't pronounce it right, but I got close. I'm sorry, somebody will help me with that. Mindfulness, clear comprehension to extinguish the fire. You would do the same thing to practice mindfulness and awareness and support of other people. So there's a kind of spiritual urgency that comes with the Buddha's teachings, and that is a narrative with which many translations are done. And I think that the part of, let's say, this kind of hair on fire is that we really do have to take care of things that are on fire close to our head. It's like when something's gonna burn you, you really do have to strive to put that fire out. And that there's times and emergencies, and there's senses of crisis where you really have to, take the first step. But then there's also times where we know these crises are ongoing, and they're something that we're knowing more about, and that we have to learn how to understand them, that we have to bring in something of clear comprehension, of calm, of wisdom, of what we've learned from taking care of the crisis. and that we can't always live in survival mode or crisis mode. It will basically burn us out. And that is one of our, let's say, our understandings in reflective meditation is that um, we can't put out all the fires. We can't do it perfectly. And that we're going to look at how we're doing it with more kindness and curiosity, because each of us are standing in a different place on the planet. Some people are not dealing with the Southern California fires. Well, you're dealing with Oregon fires or Australia fires, but some places there's rainforest and fire is not the problem in that place. Um, so I'm thinking of striving and perfection more in the long run, like a marathon. How do we do this for the long term? And how do we keep the fire going to support each other, which is a very big piece of this puzzle. Okay, I'll end here this morning. Thank you very much.